The film begins with Professor Robert Oppenheimer attending a hearing behind closed doors. Upon being asked about his past, the film cuts back in time, and we get to meet young Robert Oppenheimer studying physics at the University of Cambridge. Suffering from anxiety, he's unable to sleep at night. Consequently, his coordination skills are affected, and he gets sloppy hands in the lab. After being grounded by his professor, he decides to poison his apple with a chemical substance, but regrets it and returns to the lab to prevent his professor's death. There, he meets Professor Bohr, who prompts Robert to study theoretical physics in Göttingen. Listening to that advice and receiving his PhD, Robert returns to America and starts teaching quantum physics at the University of California, Berkeley. Initially, only one student attends his class, as quantum physics is not well known in America, but gradually his class is filled with more and more interested students. Apart from teaching, Robert also gets involved with the Communist Party without being a formal member. While attending one of the party's gatherings, he meets with Jean, a woman whom he has a quick adventure with. The following days, Robert's informed that nuclear fission was achieved in Germany, and he immediately jumps into doing his calculations. Although he concludes nuclear fission is impossible, a scientist named Alvarez achieves it in the lab. Despite being happy to catch up with the German scientists, Robert's also concerned because he knows this scientific discovery can also be weaponized. A few days later, Robert meets a married woman named Kitty. The two of them grow fond of each other and Kitty becomes pregnant, resulting in her getting a divorce from her husband. In the meantime, the Nazis have started threatening the world, and Robert receives a visit from General Groves of the American Army. He wants to include Robert in the Manhattan Project, where he'll compile a team of scientists to work on developing the atomic bomb. In fact, Robert will be the head scientist. Being of Jewish origin, Robert's motivated to participate in the project and quickly takes the first few steps. First, he guides Groves into creating a secluded base where the scientists can work in secret. Second, he starts recruiting the scientists. Many of them are reluctant to join this project, but Robert's able to convince them one way or another. Although he's not certain if they should create the atomic bomb, he's convinced that they need to have it before the Nazis do. Once the team's compiled, one of the members, Teller, figures out that an atomic detonation could potentially cause a chain reaction that could ignite the atmosphere and wreak disaster. Oppenheimer takes the findings to Albert Einstein, but the latter states that he hates math, so he can't help him with this. Upon returning to his team, Robert's informed that they have run some calculations, and it seems like Teller was wrong. The chances of Teller's calculations manifesting are close to zero. Despite working hard, the project stalls because there's not enough plutonium for an atomic bomb. Teller suggests they create a hydrogen bomb, but his ideas are disregarded. The team spins more ideas, but they soon realize those same ideas are being tested by the Russians. The Russians are allies to the Americans, but they're not informed about the efforts of the Manhattan Project to construct an atomic bomb. The government tries to figure out if there's a mole in the scientists' team. A high-ranked member of the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission, Lewis Strauss, questions Oppenheimer because he knows he had ties with the Communist Party. Since the Russians are communists, he wonders if Oppenheimer would share his knowledge with them. A couple of years later, the war's almost over, but the team's now gathered the amount of plutonium required for the bomb. While they wonder if they really should develop the bomb, Oppenheimer states that it'll serve as a fair warning for all nations because once they see its destructive power, they'll stop wanting more of these weapons. The team develops the bomb and they test it successfully. President Truman of the USA orders an attack on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The attack goes well for them and everybody starts celebrating. Oppenheimer tries to join them, but he also started feeling a bit guilty. When he meets with President Truman in person, he exclaims he feels like he has blood on his hands. Even though he advises the president to stop developing such weapons, Truman does quite the opposite. In the brisk of the Cold War, the Americans now have more interest in developing the hydrogen bomb as well. At the same time, the Russians have been working on developing their own weapons. Oppenheimer's now crowned as the father of the atomic bomb, and his influence has grown. He decides to use his reach and publicly states that all nations should not develop weapons of mass destruction after seeing the devastating results of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki attacks, where many people died directly and indirectly due to the bomb's radiation. The film cycles to the first scene we saw, and we now find out that Oppenheimer's attending a hearing before a personnel security board, revolving around his Q clearance. With a fast montage, the film shows us that this hearing's been orchestrated by Lewis Strauss, because he's been holding a grudge against Oppenheimer. In the past, Robert humiliated him in a public hearing in front of the Congress. Oppenheimer does not stand a chance in this hearing because everything's been set up in a way that'll get his clearance denied. His past relationship with the Communist Party is used against him, while his lawyer has a hard time defending him because there's always new information popping up, information that he should have been aware of as a lawyer. Eventually, the board refuses to renew Robert's clearance. Strauss has achieved what he desired, but that also backfires on him when his own secretary exposes him in a public hearing. The man, Hill, reveals that Strauss had been hating Oppenheimer for a long time because the two of them could not agree on a common policy. Thus, Strauss found other people who disliked Oppenheimer, such as Teller, and used them against him. Although Oppenheimer loses some of his edge, he receives the Enrico Fermi Award from President Lyndon Johnson later in time. The film ends with a discussion of Oppenheimer with Albert Einstein. Robert asks him if he remembers the day the two of them met, because Oppenheimer was afraid he would start a catastrophic chain of reactions. Even though he was referring to atmospheric ignition back then, Oppenheimer's afraid that he started that chain of reactions indirectly, and is afraid it may lead to the end of the world.